first, what I did for myself is I connected with my inner child and the deepest wounded aspect of myself, and I let that part know, and then like sat with this, like, you know, breathing and crying, whatever necessary, to let that part know that like I'm there always. No matter what anyone else does, if anyone else leaves, I'm here for that aspect of me. I had to learn that regardless of whether I'm loved, especially sexually or intimately, regardless of that, I'm worthy. Regardless of how much money I make, or whatever I do in the world, I'm worthy. And it's one thing to know that, it's another thing to like really hold that within yourself. And you can check yourself by looking at your actions. Anyone can, right? I understand that I'm worthy. And it's like, well, if you continuously abandon what you truly want to do or what you feel you need in order to feel the love of someone else externally, then you haven't embodied that self-worth yet. For me, self-worth, like this is my definition, is like I know what it is that I need to feel safe and to feel good and to feel happy, and I do that despite if it satisfies everyone else.
Welcome, dear listener, to the James Xander Trip. My guest today is someone I've been wanting to meet for a long time, and it's such a pleasure to finally meet you, Lion Carew. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, brother. It's an honor to be here. Really excited for the opportunity and just for your invitation. And yeah, thank you. It's always a beautiful pleasure to speak and to share and to have these conversations. So thank you.
For those that don't know anything about you, how would you describe yourself and the work that you do today?
Most definitely. It's funny how this kind of changes every time I say it, but I'm going to try to do it as concisely as possible. So to get a window into my world, I'm a respiratory therapist. I would describe myself as an embodiment coach, a sexual energy coach for men. I'm also guiding humans to understand human design, but really I'm a coach. I'm a guide that helps people to understand their body, what it means to be human, what it means to be also like an energetic being. And I've brought together what I've learned through allopathic medicine, through the Eastern philosophies of breath, of movement, of yoga, human design, all these things that I've learned over the years to bring a practical, approachable way to distill that in the human experience. And that is usually in the form of coaching, but that's my world and my window. It's what I love to do, is like to impact people in that way and guide them in that way so they can live a more rich experience. And I usually do that with men. That's been my main focus lately, is focusing on men, because I am a man. I have that direct experience. So yeah, I think that would summarize it pretty well. How'd that sound to you?
Sounds great.
Fantastic.
I think you once described yourself as a divine masculine coach.
Yes, at one point.
What is the role of the masculine in today's world?
I'd say the role of the masculine, well, I'm going to take a higher vantage point, then we can maybe distill it down into what today, but as an overarching theme, as like an archetypal theme that could be recognized universally, it's like the structure, something that holds something, something that is present and that ensures that there's an awareness of something, that there's, I think of it like the sun. The sun's always shining. It's always there, and it's holding within its light the ability for things to arise, right? Or, a bedrock that is holding the water that moves down a stream. The role or how it shows up in our daily society today is that will never cease. But I think that what's really present today is like, what does it mean to embody integrated masculinity with what we've been taught in the past, and how is that showing up today? So to rephrase this, or like to bring it into the present moment, I believe that masculinity in the present day really is about not just that masculine pole, but we're talking about men. What is it, their relationship to their feminine pole as well, and how do they want to live into both of those together? How do they want to define that for themselves? So I think masculinity these days, of course, there's an outward expression, but it requires a lot of internal navigation to really discover that for oneself and to embody that in your own unique way.
What's been your journey as a man and navigating the masculine pole, the feminine pole, integrating them, leaning on one, leaning on the other? I'm really curious if you can guide me through your journey.
Yeah, definitely. So for me, I was raised by my mother and my grandmother primarily. My father left when I was really young, and I had a lot of exposure to women in the feminine energy, which was really, really amazing. And just to like kind of summarize that, like what occurred for me in that childhood period was really embracing the feminine, like the motherly energy, the nurturing energy, and really pushing away masculine energy. I also had a stepfather who I now have a really great relationship with. He's no longer my stepfather, but he's a great person. And all my wounds, I'd say, with the masculine are quite healed at this point. But however, when I was younger, I really just thought that this unintegrated, I don't like using this word, but people will understand when I say it, this toxic masculine energy, I thought that was masculinity. I like to call it unintegrated because unintegrated can become integrated. So this very non-life-giving form of masculinity that we've seen, in the past 100 years, 200 years, maybe even 2,000 years perhaps, I thought that was masculinity. And I really thought there's no place for that in my life. I was very, very strongly a warrior for women and femininity and really believing, and I still do, that needs more attention. But I didn't recognize that one feeds into the other, that like polarity, and which causes our dual experience, this polar nature, right? Like a positive particle, a negative particle, manifesting as the feminine and masculine. These two are interwoven, and they nourish each other, they feed each other. They're two sides of the same coin, right? They're the different degrees of one expression. So as I went through my journey and issues came up in my life with people pleasing, with really grasping at women to satisfy my lack of nurturing that I could give myself, I realized it was the masculine that I was lacking. It was that masculine energy. So then my journey became one of understanding what is integrated masculinity, trying to find that. Like I realized I tried to find that through many male models in my life, many male friends, but then eventually having to learn how to embody that myself. What does that really mean for me in my relationships, whether they're romantic or otherwise? And then coming to this day where I feel very satisfied or very like at peace with what masculinity feels to me, and I have a way to continue growing into that. Like I'm still a very humble and humble learner of that. But that was really my journey. I was very feminine, and I still am naturally quite feminine. I'm very nurturing, very kind. However, I had to learn the importance and the health and the vitality that comes with the masculine energy and what it means when it shows up healthily in my own body, and then how I express that as a man.
How did you learn that, and what helped you the most to embody the masculine?
It's a great, great question. I think the first, like how I learned this was I had to recognize first that there was a piece missing. So that's awareness, right? Like I recognized that the feminine energy on its own was not enough. So that awareness piece. And then I think it really began outwardly, wanting to find constructive male role models, and almost like a fatherly essence. So there was this grasping on the outside. And through that, I recognized that I wouldn't really find that in someone else outside of myself. So then turning to myself, there was a lot of practices of, okay, what does it mean? What is that masculine energy of structure? What is that masculine energy of presence? And when I asked myself those questions, I went into practices of, primarily setting boundaries, like learning how to assert myself or to communicate my needs. And then another practice that I don't think many men associate with masculinity is presence with myself and presence with what I'm doing and presence with whatever I'm imbuing myself with. So these two sides of like outward masculinity, like if I have something that's important to me that needs to be communicating that, or something I don't want to experience, creating a boundary around that, respecting those within myself and making them clear around my relationships, making my intentions clear. That's that outward, and then acting in those ways. But inwardly, can I sit with myself? and offer myself the presence that, the sun offers the earth, for example? Can I actually just be in presence of myself? And that was honestly one of the harder things to cultivate, is just to be in presence, to be in stillness, kind of like Shiva, that Shiva type of energy. So this is how I started to cultivate this with myself. Combination of finding these role models, doing research as well, like what is masculinity? And there's many, many resources we can find if we look to ancient texts. We're in the age of information, right? There's so much to be found. But then I had to really go through practices to understand what that was for me. There was many times in my journey, and there still are some times, where I realize I've intellectualized things. And just because I know it and I understand it does not mean that I have a direct experience of it. And I think that's also, a little trailing off here, but I think that's such an important thing for men to, I don't want to say understand, but be willing to embrace. It's not enough to know. You have to become that. And how do you do that? You have experience of it for yourself. And that's with anything we'll talk about, psychedelics, sex, whatever it is. Like, you have to do it yourself. I think there's a level of masculinity in that. Femininity as well. But yeah, that's what I would say about that.
When you work with your clients, with other men, or when you look out at men in the world, what do you feel is the deepest wound that you see in the masculine, and how do we heal that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe I work with a lot of men who have similar stories and wounds to myself. I don't know if all men will go through this, but what I do often see in men is this self kind of castration, a people pleasing, it's a weird paradox of wanting to be powerful and wanting to assert themselves and wanting to be dominant, but in a world where there's this healing from an overarching patriarchy and not knowing how to even bring that about because it's toxic or it's not life-giving. So that's what I would often see in men, is this kind of dichotomy or this dissonance. It's like, how do I be a man? What does that even mean? Whilst living in a world that is labeling masculinity as toxic, or there's no room for this masculine nature. How do I become that? I also see a lot of men who are just wounded with the relationship to healthy masculinity or healthy men. So many men that I work with, they work with me because they're like, I just want to have a sense of brotherhood. I want to have a sense of connection. And this is still something I'm trying to figure out, like how to build community around this. And I don't really know if it's my role. I think maybe I'm more the one to speak on it. But so many men want brotherhood and deep connection, and not just, to be able to talk and connect about everything that is involved in a man's journey, especially sex. That's what the people pleasing, this kind of dichotomy. But I think that brotherhood wound, or that connection to other men, it's something that comes up a lot, like a lot of men not feeling safe to connect with other men in the ways that I've been able to connect with them, or they're just not knowing who to turn to. Like, how do I have these conversations? How do I express myself in these ways? And I see it as, like, I don't even know what to call it, maybe a brotherhood wound, like, men wanting to connect with other men and in a spherical way, not in like a chopped up way.
How did this happen? Because I feel like if we went back 1,000 years, it was natural for there to be brotherhood.
Mm-hmm.
And then now in this modern age, it does feel hard to connect with other men in a deep, intimate level.
Yeah, for sure. I think about this a lot, and I've gone back and forth in the sense of like, oh yeah, the older ways were better, like this, what's better or worse. And what I've really come to with all this is that I believe that necessity breeds like tribal and community relationships, like the necessity to survive a long time ago. We can go even further back. Like, I have all my ideas about like very, very, very ancient times, like 10, 20, 30,000 years ago. But that's maybe not so relevant to us now, because what most people would consider like our history, which seems very archaic, that's still within our DNA. We can't deny that. So let's just, without talking about aliens and like ancient civilizations, we can talk about the the primordial man, and like the necessity to survive and the necessity to be in tribe, right? And there's like a brotherhood in that. There's a deep masculinity in hunting and providing and being the shepherds of the physical third dimensional domain. Like there's deep connection in that, right? Now, what happens when you don't need to do those things anymore and we're in modern society, and that thing that makes you masculine and brings you together as brothers is no longer needed? What happens when that's traded, when the actual arena of life is traded for watching a game on TV? I think this is what happens to us, is we lose brotherhood. And from that blooms an opportunity. Now there's an opportunity for men not to like come together as brothers because they must survive, but because they want to thrive now, because they can extend themselves in a different way. So I think this is like a natural thing that's occurring, but things ebb and flow. Everything's in a rhythm, right? So it expands and it contracts. And I think this contraction is asking men, like, how do we want to be brothers again? In what degree and what level? We can use the old ways, like that old tribal mentality, but we have to rebirth it in a new way because we don't have the same circumstances, the same survival needs. Like things have changed in a profound way. So that's kind of what I think about that. It's like, how did we get here? That kind of story. And it's a beautiful thing. I see it as a beautiful thing because now it gives us an opportunity as men to really redefine what brotherhood is going to be in this modern era, because we have different challenges, different things facing or up against us that are required of us to protect this world, to protect children, to protect women, but in a different way, and even protect ourselves and our own inner connection to our feminine and our inner child,
In your life, do you still find any challenges with connecting to the masculine?
Yeah, for sure. I do, and I like that I do. This gets me thinking about something that came into my mind today. That I posted this reel actually. I can't remember his name. Justin Pierce, I think his name is. I really like his work. Him and his partner, I can't remember her name either. They talk about cultivating the fire in the relationship and the hearth needed to keep that fire alive. And he was talking about expressing your feelings to your feminine counterpart, to your partner, who in that circumstance is a woman, and how it can make a man feel impotent and just weak and like, oh my God, I feel like so weak sharing this. And why I bring this up is because like that's where I question my masculinity, or I'm like feel I'm at the bedrock with it, or I don't know if I have the strength to do this. Like I'm doing all this masculine work, I'm helping with the masculinity. Like how can I be doing that, or how can I be at this place? But then that reel, and what it reminded me of is like that is the beauty of it. That's the work. That's where you get the opportunity to. When I get the opportunity to sit in myself and go, yes, I feel like impotent right now, or I feel weak, but that's actually that's the transcendental moment. That's where I get to stand more in myself and fierceness and be like, yes, this feels so vulnerable and scary. I don't want to share with my woman that I feel like unseen right now, or that I, want something from her, but I'm going to. And I do it with character and with pose. And so anyways, I'm kind of maybe trailing off a little bit here, but I think your question was like, do I question my own masculinity, or do I...
do you experience challenge?
Yeah, do I experience challenge? Definitely all the time. And when I say all the time, I mean like it arises in me where I question myself, direction, or am I being the best man that I can be? But I think that for me, that's a good thing. I would invite it into any man's journey, because then we're changing and we're evolving. So I think we need that, that contrast.
Are you open to talking about your sexuality and your journey with that? Because I find that to be a very fascinating part of your journey.
Yeah, definitely. Would love to.
Tell me a bit about your journey with that.
For sure. Yeah, so I feel as though I've always been like since I hit puberty, I was very curious, and I had this idea in my mind when I was younger, and I guess I still do, that like I wanted to fall in love, and love was a deep fascination of mine. I was really blessed. My mom really did teach me unconditional love, and she didn't just teach me that, but she offered me that through her experience. So I had a deep interest in falling in love and being in love, and then like the experience of going through puberty. These two things kind of merged, and I was just like deeply fascinated with like the experience of sex, the experience of intimacy, and all that offered. However, at a very young age, like any other men, I was exposed to pornography, and it took me many years to realize what that really did to my brain and did to my whole construct, my mental construct, and my somatic, my bodily construct, my whole paradigm around sex. There's a good and bad. It really brought me into this kind of hyper desire and what's the word I want to use? Very much wanting sex, very much craving it, very much like wanting to have that experience. And that led me down a road of having many different experiences with men, with women, with couples, and which was beautiful in some state, but in another state, I recognized that really just came from that programming, like wanting to satisfy something that was never really satisfiable, something physical that was only to be found in the non-physical, if that makes sense. So my journey, was very deep in wanting to explore many things. And fortunately, though, throughout that, I never really questioned my own sexuality. And what I mean by that is, I kind of navigated labels like, am I bisexual, am I homosexual, am I heterosexual? But I just came to understand at a pretty young age, like in my teenagehood, I was like, I just am attracted to what I'm attracted to, and I'll explore what I want to explore. And people can call me what they want, but how could anyone ever put a label on that? And I feel like that was just a gift that was given to me, because I've spoken to thousands of people about sexuality, men and women, like thousands and thousands, just through life and through my work. And I've come to realize that that's not an easy thing for a lot of people to just accept that, oh, maybe I have sex with a man here, and then like a year later, it's like, I don't want to do that anymore. And to not let that become so a part of the identity. For some reason, that has always just been a deep understanding in me and my soul that, like, I consider myself a heterosexual male now, but I've had sexual relations with men. I've had sexual relations with men and women. I've, with transgender humans, and I don't question. It doesn't really question my sexuality or who I am now. I think that's a good start. Is there anything else you want to go into in that arena?
When you say I consider myself a heterosexual man, yet I've been with men.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that, but let's say there's a listener out there who's like, but how can that be? Can you dive deeper into that and the labels versus not labeling versus being attracted to all sorts of people? I'd love to hear more about that.
For sure. I think maybe analogy would be helpful here. It's kind of like maybe a career path, and maybe I'll extrapolate on this more, maybe someone decides to be in a certain career path and then later on decides they don't want that to be their career path. It changes.
Do you think humans are fluid in their sexuality and they change over time to who they might be attracted to?
I think yes and no. I think some humans know and they are like that. Some humans, it changes. I think the easy answer to a lot of these things is always yes and no. In the sense that, people are looking for, what I've realized in my work as a human, also as a coach, is that people are looking for answers outside of themselves. And that's okay. It's okay to look for answers. Let's keep it in the sexual context. It's okay to look outside of yourself and see how other people have defined who they are through a word, through a label. That's fine. Try that on for yourself, But at the end of the day, the only person who can really define what you are is you. And there's no word that explains that. And it's enjoyable. It's a tool to express ourselves to the power of the word. It's so important. But we can give away so much power if I just say oh, I'm heterosexual. It's or I'm homosexual. And why I say that is because there's so much connotation. There's so many agreements that come with that.
So much baggage.
Exactly. Oh, I'm homosexual, man. I have to do this, this, and this. I have to act these ways. Not saying that, that's true. Or I'm a heterosexual man. I have to do all these types of things. I've worked with a lot of heterosexual men who are just getting over the fear of like touching their butt, or like, I have pleasure with my butt. Like, what do I do about that? So when it comes to labels, it can be constricting. If it's holding you back from being who you are, why do that to yourself? So like my journey has been one of wanting to explore and wanting to expand. So I had to create a huge container for that. And there was no containers that I could find except maybe pansexual. So I kind of tried that on for a bit, but there were really no containers, labels that fit into what I wanted to explore.
What about the bisexual label?
Yeah, I feel like that could work, but the reason I call myself heterosexual, why I fit into that, is because I know now in myself through my experience that I want to cultivate a relationship with a woman, and I am, and that's what I want. And I want to be with one woman. I want to have that life partner. I want to co-create with that person, but it took me time to figure that out.
When you were seeing men, what did you notice about the differences in polarity between connecting with a woman and connecting with a man romantically or sexually?
Yeah, well, I never dated men. I was never in like a boyfriend relationship, It was only like sexual encounters, and oftentimes it was like a man and a woman, more often than not. There's only a few select times where it was just men, but I did find that one of the most interesting things is I think I got more of the experience of what it's like in the essence of what it's like to be a woman, because I found men are very forward. They're very forward. Oh my goodness. Very forward. And there can almost be like I want to say playing around, but it's like, wow, okay. Like I notice when I interact with women, there's a nuance to that. Sometimes there is like a giving and a taking. And sometimes with men, it's just like, this is what wants to happen, This is like,
which can also be an advantage.
Yeah,
directness.
Yeah, it can be like, okay, wow, we're just like we're going there. Okay, like there's no guessing games. But the creating of the polarity is a fascinating thing. Like I found myself very easily and most often falling into more of a feminine pole. That's what I wanted to do. That's the experience I wanted to have. But that would be engaging. I could tell it was engaging for them. I'd be like, oh yeah, a little flirty, but then pulling away, like that created a polarity. But that's I think that's an important thing for men and all humans to recognize, right? Like, where does the attraction really come from? It's like two beings have to play in a opposite role, energetically speaking. Why do couples lose their sexual connection? Because they fall into the roles of becoming friends or coworkers or parents, and those aren't sexually charging roles. And that can be man, or woman, or man and woman, whatever label, doesn't matter. Whatever genitals you have, it doesn't matter. There needs to be space, and there needs to be time created for two different charges, because like two different charges are going to attract. So someone has to be in this dominant masculine space holding, directing energy. The other has to be in this surrendering, expressing, more emotional, like to create that charge. And if that doesn't occur, then it's going to be really, really difficult. I don't want to say impossible, but it's going to be hard to have that passion, that sexual energy, want to fuse together, want to co-create together. It's like magnets. They're either going to attract or they're going to repel. And it just depends on the context, what you really want.
It makes sense. So you're saying in a same-sex relationship, there always has to be one charge that's more feminine, one charge that's more masculine. Can it switch between the two people? How do you feel about that?
I think so. I think why not? And strictly in a sexual context, right? And I think this is really cool to talk about, right? Because it's easy for us to mix all these things, all these different kind of categories and layers of a relationship. So let's just take like a man and a man relationship. If they're working together in business, like it's both can be in the masculine charge. It's probably great. But if they're wanting to have a sexual relationship, one is going to have to go into that feminine charge. Now that can show up in very many different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to mean like the feminine is always receiving or bottoming. It's an energy. It's an energy of surrender. It's an energy of allowing. It's It's a very powerful energy, when you really, really think about it. But that has to occur in the sexual container. If there's going to be sexual polarity, if there's going to be attraction, if there's going to be a wanting to mate. And why is that? Because we're working with biology. It's incredibly intelligent. What does it want to do? It wants to procreate. It needs to bring different things together to create something new. So yeah, that whatever combination of human, anything in life actually, like you can't procreate with the same charge. Like we need the opposite charges. And now it's manifested in our human experiences like attraction and chemistry and all these like mind things. But when we really get down to the energetics of it, I believe that's what's going on.
You've spoken before about hermetic principles and how the law of union, or how did you call it? The law of nature, divine union,
mm-hmm.
and having that feminine and masculine aspect. What do you think is the cosmic spiritual reason behind male to male relationships? I'd love your thoughts on that.
Definitely. Yeah, this is a great question. The easy answer is that consciousness or God, capital God, or the all, like let's use the all because that's hermetic principles. And for people who are listening and don't know what I mean by that, it's like all that is and all that isn't, the beginning, the end, the
one.
Yeah, the one, like that can't be brought into words. Like even this description is not fully it.
Joseph Campbell called it the great mystery.
The great mystery, exactly. So the all, I was on a train of thought there. Yes, the manifestation of why two men coming together. The all wants to experience everything. I mean, that's the kind of like, oh, really? That's the cheap answer. Maybe not the cheap answer, but the simplest like answer is really that. It's going to express and experience everything. Like try to wrap your head around that. It's like everything. So of course, male relationships, female relationships, all the things that we see manifest in this physical reality, it's part of it. What's the spiritual inclination? I mean, for me, I think it's just, again, that the soul's journey, having a different experience, knowing what that is. What is it like to do that? For me, personally, that's enough. I think that people kind of remove or they categorize spirituality. This is spiritual, that's not spiritual. Baby, it's all spiritual. It's really like, and they give away their power. That's like, you bring the spirituality. We're bringing the spirituality to things. So you can make everything not spiritual, and that can be your experience, and great. Or you can imbue that and recognize like, wow, these two men are choosing in their incarnation to have this experience, even though maybe in nature they can't procreate, but there's so many things that consciousness wants to experience. It wants to forget itself. It wants to do all these nuanced, variant things, and that's beautiful, So that's what I've really come to understand. It doesn't always need to be practical. It doesn't always need to be like, oh, we need to procreate, these types of things. Like there's many things that I think are done in a spiritual context or in the expansion of awareness and consciousness itself, just for the sake of it. So that's kind of what I would say about that.
What I find fascinating in your journey is that you experienced both, but then you still chose to come back to the union between a man and a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And you're very secure in not labeling that.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that about you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think there's some other nuances that I want to bring into this. Like, I think, or I know for me, when it comes to when it came to sex, or when it does come to sex, it continues to be this way. From a young age, I really knew that it was sacred, even though I didn't really know what that meant. I can, in retrospect, say that I knew it was sacred. I didn't have that wording or that like understanding, but I knew there was something profound about it. And I knew I wanted to have a life partner, and I knew that I was attracted to women. And whilst holding what seems like a paradox, I also wanted to experience other things. And when it comes to sex, but really when it comes to anything in life, but let's just talk about sex, there are many paradoxes, I believe, that can be held that offer a really profound and fulfilling experience. If there's one thing that people take away from what's shared here is like, how many paradoxes can you hold in your experience? Because if you can, then you can really do something that's beautiful as a human, is have a human experience, which is very dual. It's very contrasting. I would argue that you're going to experience in this life in equal measure all that comes to you. So, you're having the best month ever. Well, get prepared for it in equal measure, some way for it to, the pendulum to swing the opposite way. So it's a very dual experience. However, when you hold those two opposing experiences, or those opposing views, or those opposing ways that you could go, you unify them. So I recognize that it is a paradox that I've always known that sex was sacred and I wanted to have a life partner, but I've chosen to be a sex worker at one point, to have many different arrays of sexual experiences that one would maybe not label sacred, that were purely to satisfy my flesh. I've had experiences with men and, all different types of humans. Very contrasting worlds. How do I rectify them? Recognizing that, it's a paradox. It's a paradox that I've chosen, and also that allows me to have a unified experience, recognizing that it's that contrast that creates a middle point in the whole thing, and has allowed me to have clarity on the whole thing. And really it's very personal. So when I share these types of things, maybe it inspires people. They're like, wow, like I can gather something from that. But the most important thing is that someone follows their own path. Like maybe they don't know themselves sexually throughout their life, or they didn't know that sex was sacred. Great, that's totally normal for you. Maybe you're like me and you've always had this like core sense within you, and that's followed you throughout your whole life. Great, that's for you. The message I want to get with this piece that I'm sharing is that like we all come in with something, and to not think that that's not normal or for you, whether it's clarity or lack of clarity, or mega direction, or feeling you have a purpose, or feeling like you're a wanderer, like that's for you. That really, really is. Some of us, are, know that we want to explore. Some of us don't. And it's like, what are you going to do with that is, I think, the beautiful thing,
Embrace the paradox.
Yeah, exactly. Embrace it.
I love that. And it's such a reminder, this conversation, of how nuanced and complex life can be. And that it's the easy ways to just be put in a box.
Mm-hmm.
And what you've done is experienced a rich variety of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And just gone your own way with all the paradoxes.
Tried my best.
What was the world, you mentioned working as a sex worker.
Mm-hmm.
What was that world like, and why did you choose to go in that direction, and what was that journey like for you?
Yeah, I learned a lot in that phase. Still pieces of learning. Why did I go into that direction? Well, I think it all really did start with, I get a lot of dudes reaching out on me on Instagram for when, at the time, I was posting a lot of yoga stuff, a lot of movement stuff, and I've always been in pretty good shape. And I had a lot of men reaching out asking to do like nude photography. And I was also somewhat like sometimes doing modeling, like not professionally, but like, get a gig here and there. And I remember at that time, and when was this? Maybe like 2017 or something, I recognized that I was really afraid to be naked. This is also a big part of my masculine journey, is like reclaiming my body and not, and I still work on this. Like there's still, I feel it in my body still. It's like, oh man, is my dick big enough? Even though like every partner I've been with, there's no issue. Anyways, I wanted to feel comfortable being naked. And I thought, yeah, nude photography could be a great way to get comfortable with that, because it made me so uncomfortable, and I realized the fear of just like of revealing myself, not being big enough. Like, what if I get cold? All these types of things. So I did some nude photography and really enjoyed it. Like I'm a Leo, I'm like, yay, the show lights are on me. Awesome. And while I was doing some nude photography, one of the photographers was like, you could make a lot of money doing OnlyFans. And I was like, what's OnlyFans? And at the time I was like, sweet, like I can post some naked videos, or I can post myself touching myself and make some money. Fantastic. Why don't I just do that? Not thinking like too much of that. So I started doing that and didn't really take it too seriously for the first few months, but then I did, and it started like paying my rent and more. And I was like, oh man, this is awesome. Like why don't I keep doing this? But then something deep inside of me, which I've always had, was like, why are you doing this? At a young age, around 20, I had like a really big awakening and really started to question things like, what kind of essence am I imbuing into all the things that I do? So the same thing came up, like, well, why am I doing this? And I, at that time, kind of created a complex around, I want to bring forward like sexual liberation. Like, look at how, I want to be free in my body. I'm going to show people that journey. So show the sacredness of sex. And as I look at it back, I intellectually understood a lot of those things, but I hadn't fully embodied those things. So going into that work, I wanted to do that, but I was really like in this in between of, I want to make money doing this. I want to show the sacredness of sex, maybe bringing myself into it too quickly. And a lot of those things ended up being a bit of a mishmash, exploring some different things, like doing some things that were nurturing to my soul, doing some things that afterwards I was like, oh, that was really not nurturing. It was actually like, felt like it tarnished me, or like I wasn't really in my highest alignment. Like I did some videos in the industry, and that really like brought me to a dark place. I wasn't treated poorly or anything like that. However, like my soul was just like, yo, like that doesn't feel good. Like we don't want to do that. So yeah, to kind of like summarize that, it began with a self-empowering journey, and it led me through various corridors. And actually, I think this is going to come into a really nice piece here, that sometimes we're sparked into something and we think it's like a direct path into the light, and it's not. At least not in my experience. There's many corridors. And I think actually this is like taking from someone else, but like, it's not like you just go like, woo, okay, we're going to the light. Like, thank you, God. It's like, there's going to be darkness there. There's going to be moments of inintegrity. There's going to be moments of self-doubt and shame. And like, why did I do that? And that was that journey for me. And again, it was very necessary for me to understand what the sacredness of sex is, and understand what is a yes and no in my own body. And and also understand that like, I don't want to offer my sexual energy in exchange for money. Even though I could have made a lot more money than I did make. But I realized that, and no judgment to those who do. Much power to those who decide to do that. That's their journey. And I see them in the highest light. Anyone who decides to do whatever they want with their body and their journey, that's up to them. But for me, it was like, I didn't want to do that. Yeah. So that was kind of like that, the navigation into that world, and maybe the tie-in lesson there at the end.
What is your relationship to pornography? How do you think of it in terms of your own relationship to it, having been in the industry a little bit, and then also how it affected you as a teen, also the societal implications of so many men being addicted to it? I'm really curious as to your thoughts, because I'm sure it'll be nuanced.
For sure. I mean, yeah, I think there's kind of a few, how do I put this? So I think pornography in and of itself is quite damaging. And when I say that, I want to bring caveats into this, because I want people to understand that those who create these videos or who are performing in them, they're not to blame. I don't think anything bad of them. I don't even think anything bad of the industry. I just think that it in itself, like the pornography is like, I see it as an entity, as a living being, has so much energy and attention towards it. If we just look at it that way, actually, this is probably the best approach to look at it, is like, think of how much attention goes to it, right? It's being given a lot of life force. And what is that entity? Well, it's showing a very finite view of what the sexual connection is. And it's not showing, in most cases, the truth. Like, a lot of it's chopped up. Like when I filmed in the industry, it was like, okay, we're going to film some B-roll. We're going to film like some penetration scenes, different positions. There's no real sexual connection. It was all about like that, like, let's see the penetration, let's see the ejaculation, let's see these kind of moments that we know are going to sell and really heighten people, really give that dopaminergic effect. And let's bring that forward into like a video. So I think because of that, porn can be really, really damaging, and it can really shift physiology. And this is something that I've been really fascinated with, and doing my best to teach men. And what I've had to learn myself is that we're training ourselves when we watch pornography, when we watch it. We watch anything, but what are we learning from pornography? Well, we can get these massive doses of dopamine. We get these massive doses of telling our body that we just did something that that the body wants so badly. And then for an men's case, if they ejaculate, it's like, okay, now great, you did it. You've won. You've impregnated the human, you've done it. Fantastic. And you do that over and over and over and over again. What does your body do? It lowers the threshold for all of those chemicals, because the body is an amazing adapting machine. It's just an adapting machine, not just, but the physical body, that's what it does. How can I use the least amount of energy? So to come back, I think porn is a very powerful entity, a very powerful energy that is making a ton of money based off of a dark aspect of sexual energy, that it's very satisfying, that it's very pleasing. But if you do it in a short way, like if you just get sexual energy like that, it comes at a huge cost. And this comes back to a yoga philosophy that it's tamasic. It starts off sweet and it ends up poisonous. Sattva, or like sattvic, like the satya age, or the highest age, is this long-term kind of gratification approach to things. If you really want to cultivate the fruits of sexual life force energy and sex, it takes work, it takes presence, it takes moving through the impurities of yourself and also the combination of those two people to actually cultivate, nourish, and harvest those fruits. If you're getting it like boom, like what porn offers, it's going to rot, because it's not sustainable. It's not true, if that makes sense. So yeah, this is the things that I think about pornography, like this is the things that I think we're up against. And I think it's just good for people, like men especially, but women too, that there is a cost to watching pornography. There is this doing something to your body. It's doing something to your brain. And if you're like me, like I had to go through a process of changing my physiology, changing my relationship with my body, learning how to get hard without it, learning how to reestablish the different sensations and levels of pleasure without that immense amount of stimulation, without that immense amount of exposure in my body.
Is there a spiritual cost to it as well?
Yeah, dude. Well, I'm glad you asked. I believe there is. I think there's there's a direct connection to our own energy that we feel, and like our level of animation, and then to like the connection to our soul. So what we pay attention to and what we offer our attention to, if it's bringing us energy and it's vitalizing us, you could say it's enriching the soul's guiding us in that way. And if we're getting drained, we're detaching ourselves from that. So I think that, there's no wrong path, but if you're continuously doing something that is draining to you, then you're disconnecting yourself from a higher power. You're disconnecting yourself. You're almost shortening the siphon, or like squeezing it so tight that there's only a drip coming through. And we're always connected, to our soul. Our soul is like the most direct beam or like column to the one energy, to Great Spirit. That's how I would define it. So I think there is a cost. It's like trying to find externally what you can find internally, very cliche kind of verbiage, but it's like you're trading the external, which is impermanent, or trading what, something outside of yourself that seems very, very satisfying, and it is in those moments, for something that's everlasting, which is internally. And that trade-off is cutting yourself off more and more and more from what's internally. You're stepping further and further and further away. And every time you do, it's harder and harder to come back because it's uncomfortable. It's super uncomfortable. You just trained your whole vessel, which is the filtering system of your soul, to not be able to tolerate being within yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just recognizing, like, if you're going to step away from your own self through the screen, pornography, whatever else, at some point you're going to have to come and sit within yourself again. Hopefully that's not when you are about to die, because that makes it very uncomfortable, right? So hopefully more and more times you can come back to yourself and recognize, like, the more I'm enriched by this body, the closer I am to God, the closer I am to beauty and bliss. So hopefully that brings it into summation. I think there is a cost. It detaches us from ourself is really the cost. And that detaches us from our essence, because it's through this body that we are, at least in this experience, where we get to connect more to ourself, to have that internal experience.
Mm. Mm-hmm. What is the best way to quit porn for anyone listening to this who might be addicted or who wants to come back to themselves and they don't want to consume that anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Where do they start? And have you found with your clients any effective methods of coming back to self,
Mm-hmm.
saying no to it forever?
Yeah, this is a good question. It's nuanced. I think the most powerful thing that I've been able to offer or come to realize in my own journey is it's all about the relationship and how you define that relationship. So I think first is the acceptance that porn does offer that person something enjoyable, and coming to accept that. Yes, I like watching pornography. Yes, I've watched all these things, and being okay with that, loving that. And then recognizing the other side of it, like, okay, what is the cost? So what I'm really getting at here is, instead of, I need to quit this thing, this terrible, terrible thing, I'm like a piece of shit and shameful for doing this, and then trying to step away from that. When someone does that, when a man does that, he's cutting off a piece of himself. It's like, why are you watching pornography? Well, of course it feels good, but it's also very soothing, It's also an immediate relief. It's an immediate sense of soothing and satisfaction, and also like intimacy, So if you can have a relationship with yourself like that as a man and really navigate, like, why am I watching pornography? And then learn to love the aspect of yourself that is ashamed and like grossed out by it. Now you've developed something that is much more fortified than trying to push that aspect away and lock it up. Because eventually it's going to emerge in you somehow, whether you're going to watch porn again, you're going to relapse, or you have some sort of physical manifestation of illness or unwellness, or maybe it manifests in your sexual relationships, and you're disconnected or whatever it is, right? That aspect, you need to have a relationship with it. Understand for yourself, and then go through the perhaps emotional work of like, what's there for me? Why do I have this relationship to pornography? Forgive yourself. Go through that emotional work. Recognize like myself, I had to recognize, I didn't know any better. This is what I was taught. This is what was exposed to me. And then have the deep courage and humility to recognize, I need to relearn what this is for me. That's, I think, a big aspect too, is like, it's hard for men, especially if they're later in life, to go like, I need to relearn what sex is. I need to relearn what kind of relationship I can have with my body, that it's not just this like, okay, penis, let's ejaculate. It's like relearning that whole experience, that whole dialogue. That's, I think, the best approach I've been able to offer to men, is it's not some sort of like journaling thing, or it's not some sort of like meditation. It's like a whole relationship, and going from like, what is this relationship? Okay, have I healed that relationship? Have I integrated that relationship? And now am I willing to create a new relationship, which is, as I'm sure you can imagine, it's like a mental thing, it's an emotional thing, it's a physiological thing. So yeah, that's what I would say about that.
Can you paint a picture of how you help someone create a new relationship? Is there some practice or some format that people can use from this podcast to start developing that relationship within themselves?
For sure. I would say, so 2 things. One, doing it on your own is harder. So I'd recommend to any man, like, find a friend, like talk to someone, another guy who is experiencing this, which can be really, really effective. That alone can be really helpful. Or to talk to someone who's a little bit further along the journey, who, has a good relationship, or has, like myself, like, I just don't have any desire to watch pornography. Or if like, I still get aroused by things. I see like a beautiful woman or something like that, but I know what to do with that now. Like, I'm very okay with that. But finding someone who has a certain level of stillness or groundedness in that can be really, really helpful, because then you can share that journey together. I'll talk a little bit more of that in a moment. However, on your own, some practical steps are, first, listing out like, what are the things that you get from pornography? What does it really offer you? And try to go deep with that. It's not just that it feels good. Like, is it soothing? Does it give you a sense of nurturing, of like satisfaction? Like, what are all the benefits that you get? Like, maybe it arouses you in a deep way. I don't know. What are the costs, and this can be a really profound one for men. Like, how is it affecting your relationships? How is it affecting your work? Like, how is it affecting your energy? And then when you can really look at that, now you can make a conscious choice. So this is the next step, is embarking on the conscious choice journey, where yes, sometimes you might choose to watch pornography, but you're making it from this place of going, okay, I know what the cost is. I'm going to do it. Because before, usually it's just like this switch that turns off, and they're not thinking about the cost. They're just like going into it. It's like a trance, that they're locked into. So this can be a profound shift. Okay, I am gonna watch pornography. I'm gonna release my seed, knowing that this is the cost. And that over time starts, I think, to shift things. All it takes is some time of working with that practice. And maybe one time it's like, actually, I'm not going to. Now some new neural pathways are starting to be created. So that is a very practical step men can take. But I think what's really helpful with that, and what I help men with when in my coaching, is when they slip or when they choose to, I'm there being like, awesome, great, you slipped. Like, what did we learn from that? How did that feel? What came up in you? And having another man and sitting with another man who you've just shared a very shameful thing, and he's going, yeah, brother, like, I get it. Let's, how do you want to move forward? Like, like a father, like, let's pick ourselves back up and continue forward. Despite what you do, I'm here and I love you and I care about you. That's so important. We need to, as men, to learn how to do that for ourselves. Sometimes it's easier with an external model. And then on the other side, it's like, sweet, bro, you just like decided not to watch pornography. Like, why did you do that? How did it feel for you? Like, what are some of the things that you went through? Like, was it challenging? Was it not challenging? A man can do this for himself, of course, and to some degree, he always has to, because we need to have that inner masculine, that inner father that congratulates us when we did well and reminds us when we're on our knees that he's always there for us. But it's really helpful if a guy has another guy or someone that he can share this journey with. I think that's really, really potent. So to wrap it, to come back, knowing the cost, knowing the benefit, going on a journey to make a conscious choice, like really, like, am I going to do this, or am I not going to do this? And then from there, what I've worked on with clients is getting them to really ask themselves and write out, like, what kind of relationship do they want to have with sex? What kind of relationship do they want to have with their body? What kind of relationship do they want to have with their partner? Is sex or is pornography going to allow that to happen? There needs to be enough pain for change to occur. So if a man's in a situation where he's like, well, like, this is fine, like, it's not that uncomfortable for me, that's okay. Like, continue to watch the pornography. It's all good. Until the point where it's like, this, I don't want this, like, it's affecting my relationship, or I don't have energy at work, or I just don't feel good in myself. There needs to be that peace. And you discover those pieces by defining for yourself, what kind of relationship do you want to have sex? What kind of relationship do you want to have with your body? What kind of relationship do you want to have with another person? Defining that for yourself, creating that type of person, and then creating behaviors and habits around that. So that's how I think those are practical steps in which men can use, and just recognizing that it's a journey. There's no like quick thing. It's just like, it's a reprogramming process that takes time and willingness.
Can I ask, how has your relationship with sex evolved over the last couple of years, and how is it evolving currently?
Cool. I don't think I've been asked that question. Let me feel into that. My sexual relationship with my partner is really amazing. And I think it's the best that it's ever been. So I'd say, to answer it directly, it's evolving in a really beautiful way, and it's changing in a really beautiful way. I used to believe that I required different sexual partners to have a whole and complete sense of the sexual experience. And I no longer feel that or need that. In my own journey, that was necessary. Maybe for others, it's not. But actually, can you ask me the question again?
How has your relationship with sex evolved over time?
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, I'm in the right direction. Sometimes I like hear the words, and then there's like this stuff comes through where it's an interesting experience. There's lots to share.
It's all good stuff.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, so I think, this is on the right track of what I'm wanting to explain, that, I thought I needed these different partners or different experiences. And how it's evolved now is I'm experiencing something that I knew in my mind and that I had read about, but I had not yet quite experienced, which is how deep sex can be with one person, with the commitment, with when I've found someone who I feel is really on my level. It's evolving for me in a way where I experience sex as so multifaceted. Like, it's joyful, it's deep, it's raw. Like, there's all these different aspects to it, and more I'm experiencing how, like, yeah, this can be a life practice. This can be something that I really enjoy, and I can step into, and however it's showing up in the moment. So more and more, kind of like a spiritual practice. Like, I show up in sex curious about how it might show up or what might arise, and recognizing that for me, it's evolved as like a teacher, I would say, because there's definitely things that come up in sex. So I want these certain things, or I have these like certain fantasies, or, oh, what did this body language mean? Like, all these types of things that can cause fears that come up. But I'm seeing that more and more as an opportunity to deepen. So I'd say it's evolving for me, and like, I'm really having more experience with what it means to have like a spiritual, I guess, approach to sex, and how that really feeds into the relationship itself. Like, it's becoming more clear to me, the line of connection, that there's not just like sex and the relationship. It's like those two things for me in my relationship are fused, and I see how it's giving life. I feel how it's giving life. I'm witnessing, experiencing how it's giving life into the relationship, if that makes sense. And in my past, it felt like it was like, okay, there's sex over here, and then there's a relationship over here a little bit, like, almost like, how do you fuse those worlds? Or it's like, this is me in the sexual container, and this is me outside of the sexual container. And now I'm seeing in the evolution, like, how those things they can be very similar, and how there's a level of, and it's very exposing. Like, I've exposed myself a lot in this relationship in ways that I haven't before. But yeah, I'm seeing the parallels in those. And as I'm explaining this to you now, it's a great question, that there's, for me, a lot of similarities in like the vulnerability in life and the vulnerability in sex, and like how I can show myself in real life, and how I can show myself when I'm naked with my partner, and like I'm inside of her. There's a parallel there that's teaching me something, and that's how it's really evolving. It's like, maybe there is no difference in the energetic sense.
I love that. In what ways is it exposing?
How I would describe this is that I have stories about what are acceptable, what are lovable in the ways that I show up, and what are not. And as I allow that to be exposed and seen in this healthy relationship, it's questioning those things. Whereas I've created mechanisms to keep myself safe. Oh, you can't say these things or show up in these ways. And then when I do that with my current partner, those things are loved, and there's space for them. And so it's exposing in that way to feel in the body a discomfort, almost like the body's like, oh, this is uncomfortable, like we're going to die, like don't do that. But then to allow that to be seen, to allow myself to express that, to actually be in that, and for it not to result, for the body's discomfort and trauma to not manifest as it did in the past, or to recognize that the story is not necessarily true. Even though in my mind I know that, but the body doesn't.
Does that also tie into shame? Do you think our relationship with sex can be fraught with shame? And I'm curious if you've experienced that and how you've navigated that, or how you help your clients navigate that.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, it's always tied in with a story. The story's so powerful, right? I have, with the masculine wounding that I described earlier on, I really didn't ever want to be a man who was like male chauvinistic, or like forcing myself upon a woman or anybody. However, that came at the cost of not really expressing my needs. And there was a lot of shame around expressing like, oh, I really want this, or I want to do this. And the shame for me, I recognize, is actually just a fear of more so actually a fear of like, what if I express this and it's denied or it's ridiculed, or and yeah, and just that the shame pieces for me is like the holding and removing that out of the light of awareness. Like this can't be seen. It feels like so gross and icky. So I mean, the simple but not easy approach to that really is like, okay, like, am I able to just express this, even though it may in my mind feel like, why do I even feel like I need this? Why do I even want this? All that kind of stuff. But allowing that to be seen, allowing it to come out, so that, yeah, you can know that it's safe to express yourself in those ways. That's how I've worked a lot on this aspect of like sexual shame, which is really like the communication of my desires or what I want. And usually with men, that's what I work with, is using their word. And I think that, I mean, I was taught this as a younger man. I think a lot of men are taught this, that, we don't it's all about body language, or you don't need to ask for things, or, like try to wiggle your way in there. A very like kind of clubbing kind of essence, like just approaching women and grabbing them and stuff like that. I don't agree with this at all. I think there's some potency in holding ourselves as men, doing this in a poised way, but being like, yeah, this is vulnerable for me. Like, this is something that I want, or this is something that I desire, or, having that level of ability to speak to that. So that's something that I've always worked on with men, is like asking them. They share with me so vulnerably. I'm like, have you shared this with her or him? Like, have you actually had these conversations? And a lot of times it's no. How could I say that to them? I say it exactly how you just said it to me.
Why do we have such a hard time at times to voice our needs? Especially for any people pleasers listening to this podcast. How do we get over that? How do we express our needs fully, unashamedly?
For sure. The thing that's worked well for me, and this is really cool you're asking me this question, because this has been like a really big part of my work in the past few years, like my self-work. It's first, what I did for myself is I connected with my inner child and the deepest wounded aspect of myself, and I let that part know, and then like sat with this, like, breathing and crying, whatever necessary, to let that part know that like I'm there always. No matter what anyone else does, if anyone else leaves, I'm here for that aspect of me. The aspect that's like afraid of being abandoned, afraid of being alone. There's no love, there's no one here. I mean, I think that's what really comes down to it when people have people-pleasing tendencies, is they're afraid to be abandoned. And so the first step for me was, I'm always going to be there for myself, first and foremost. And that became a practice of, oh God, I don't want to share this with someone, or like, I notice myself wanting to people-please. Well, first I go to like, what is it that I need right now? Okay, that I need to be like, my little aspect of myself is asking, oh, I just want to be reminded that like I'm always going to be loved. So then I give myself that, and then I do the thing that's incredibly uncomfortable. So I think that can be a really potent practice for people pleasers, is be what you need for yourself, and then be willing to, practice giving yourself what you need in those moments when you're feeling the anxiety, or feeling like, oh my God, like this person might leave me if I ask for my needs, and then have the courage to do it. And if that person is not willing to, have that conversation with you, or even work with you with your needs, maybe that's not a good person for you to be in that type of relationships with. But that's the scary thing. It's like, what if you put yourself out there and actually be who you are, and they don't give you the love that you want? Well, that's very hard, but also very important. And I had to learn that lesson a lot before I really honored myself and recognized that like giving away myself, which is people pleasing, giving away my essence, will never result in a powerful relationship. It just never will. If you try to offer yourself up and give away your essence, thinking, oh, I'm going to give so much of myself, like this person will love me, you've just given away what makes the relationship possible. So I would say better to give it to yourself, and better to have the courage to go like, yeah, this is what I need, or hey, I want more of this, or whatever it is exactly that is so confronting and driving that anxiety and fear in the person.
How much of this is also related to self-worth? Being able to ask for what you want, being able to face rejection and not be moved by it.
I think it's really related. I think very, very much so, because in my own journey, I had to learn that regardless of whether I'm loved, especially sexually or intimately, regardless of that, I'm worthy. Regardless of how much money I make or whatever I do in the world, I'm worthy. And it's one thing to know that. It's another thing to like really hold that within yourself. And you can check yourself by looking at your actions. Anyone can, right? I understand that I'm worthy. And it's like, well, if you continuously abandon what you truly want to do or what you feel you need in order to feel the love of someone else externally, then you haven't embodied that self-worth yet. For me, self-worth, like this is my definition, is like, I know what it is that I need to feel safe and to feel good and to feel happy. And I do that despite if it satisfies everyone else. And I continue to learn about that all the time. It's a never ending journey, that one. I think that's actually why, like this is a weird, interesting, maybe irony or paradox. Like I know I impact people to live more empowering lives, but my own journey has been learning how to empower myself. Like that's a huge shadow that I've continuously go through. And it's a weird thing. I recognize that like even with like I've had a lot of struggles with sex. I've had a lot of struggles with self-empowerment. All the things that I teach, I've had a lot of struggle with them. Even like finding the deep love within myself. But ironically, that's what allows me to speak so potently to it and to see it in others. To see like I understand that. I've experienced that in a deep, deep, profound way.
Your struggle points to the gifts that you're here to share with others.
Yeah, exactly, man. As all of us. Yeah.
Let's jump into psychedelics and the mysteries of the universe and the nature of reality.
Would love to.
I take it you've done some explorations in this area.
Yeah, I've sat with a lot of psychedelics, a lot. I had the beautiful opportunity, I call it an opportunity, of being exposed to psychedelics at a really young age. Not promoting that. Like if anyone is younger listening to this, I'm not promoting that. That's the story I tell. I mean, for everything that's shared here, this is my story, But I had this beautiful opportunity, and I was exposed to golden teachers like psilocybin at a very young age, like 14, 15, and it really shifted things for me. It taught me a lot of things, and ever since then, I've always explored psychedelics, and they've been profound teachers, profound guides.
Can you describe your first psilocybin trip or your most profound one from that time period?
Yeah, for sure. I don't recollect so much of the first one. It was a bit of the set and setting wasn't too great.
Sounds typical.
The set and setting
first time.
Totally. Like I imagine, like you've explored quite a bit as well, yeah.
Quite a bit, yeah.
And was it at young ages?
It was in my 20s. But of course, when you first start out with psychedelics, you're so naive and you don't really know much about set and setting. And fortunately, my very first experience was with LSD, and it was in a fantastic set and setting.
Nice.
But my first mushroom trip was at a small festival, and even though it was small, there was a lot of people, a lot of energies, and it wasn't anywhere close to the intentional way that I do it now when I sit solo by myself in a dark room with a candle and intentions and all of that. So there's been a lot of learning on that front. But I think when you first start out, there's a bit of grace given to you as well by the universe. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, you're not, because you're not aware of what you should be doing, you're being protected a little bit by the universe. And then if you don't learn it, then you get a little bit of a cosmic slap.
Well said. I agree. I like this. It's fun to have the how old are you now?
30.
30. Okay, nice. Yeah, so you've had a good decade. That's awesome. Yeah, I agree that there's like this grace period because when I was like 15, I was taking like 3, 4, 5 grams routinely because I didn't know about microdosing. I didn't start microdosing until I was about 17 or 18, which was around like 2008, 2009. And what I recollect most was the complete distortion of space, of time, of like the physical reality bending on me, like really seeing how this and not being able to fully grasp, but over time having a direct experience of information that would come to me later, that this material world is not as secure as we think it is, that it's made of energy. Like I got to see that for myself. And
First person.
It's
such a wild experience,
right?
When you first see it, and then you also realize all the books that talk about vibration and frequency, they're bang on, they're right on.
That's it.
But to know it finally yourself, nothing beats that. Totally.
It's I think it's important, and important in the sense that if you haven't had if a person hasn't had a kind of without medicine induced psychedelic experience, which I think can happen through meditation and various other practices, it's important to have a psychedelic experience, to have a direct experience of the non-material aspect, the non-observable reality. It's,
for me, it was crucial.
Yeah. Well, what did you really take from it? What have you taken from it, or what do you think you took from it in the past? Because when I think about mine in the past, I didn't realize I was learning things, but now I'm like, oh wow, I realized I didn't know how to word certain things, but it was teaching me things.
For me, I'll never forget the first DMT experience, because you go from 0 to 100 so quickly, and reality completely fractalizes. And you really see frequency and energy and vibration like nowhere else. For me, that was crucial to finally know without a shadow of doubt that reality was a hologram of some sort. It was not as solid as all my life. I knew that on some level, even way before psychedelics. I remember as a kid, I just had this sense of it can't just be trees and rocks and buildings. Like there's got to be some essence permeating through it. But the skeptical, analytical mind would come online and cause a bit of doubt. And then I'd read books about how thoughts create reality, manifestation, Abraham Hicks, things like that, and felt the resonance of the words, but still had some doubts. And finally, with psychedelics and integrating those experiences, all the doubts disappeared. Understanding fully the energetic nature of the universe, the all is mind principle. This is a mental universe. Understanding manifestation on a really grounded level, I feel, rather than a fluffy level. Like we're not trying to manifest a Ferrari. It's that you're always manifesting all the time. And it's how do you flow with that? Understanding God. I mean, that was the biggest gift of psychedelics, to really tap into the divinity of everything. And I mean, Bufo, for example, takes you there so deep. The one. I mean, talk about the one.
Yeah, totally.
Fully center of the universe, at peace with everything, in unity with everything. Your problems do not exist on that level because they were illusionary to begin with. And then coming back to the 3D, and your 3D problems are still there. But you have this reference point to God, to that realm. Let's call it 4D, 5D, who knows, 7D. And you never forget that. And so you walk through the 3D world with this unshakable security that God is walking with you. And it's not based on religion, and it's not based on believing. It's knowing.
That's really well said, man. Yeah, totally. Exactly. That's I think you put in a piece there that I've been tying in quite a bit. Is like the difference between like intellectualizing something and really knowing it, experiencing it for yourself, and it's so profound. And I think you really distilled like I've learned from psychedelics is I've always, when I was a kid, I used to tell myself this a lot, like everything's going to work out, and psychedelics just really enhance that. Like I know that I've experienced like everything that you've described. Like I remember my first DMT experience. When I broke through, I saw this like giant, I don't even know how, like there was no frame of reference, but it was like this living, almost like a mantra sound, like organism type thing. And then it was like nothingness, but just this presence. And I always remember that because it showed me in the vast emptiness and like infinite eternity, there is this like beautiful just feeling of just like completion. It was like ultimate and all consuming, and like, how they describe in the text, I was like, and I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm this person. There was just, I don't know how to describe it. I can't put a word to it. Like isness, and then I had this experience of coming back into myself and like flashing through the experiences of this life. And that for me, I was like, whoa, like how can I ever not have that reference point of that infinite wholeness, that infinite calmness, which has really carried through in all my life, like giving me a sense of security, which, a lot of people ask me like, how do I do the work that I do? Or how do I live the life that I live? And I always say I trade security for freedom, but I have the ultimate security. I know that if I'm following what is in my heart, then I will be guided and I'll be safe, and I think, and I kind of recognize that in this moment with you, that there's like a level of deep security in that,
Isn't it beautiful?
It is.
I wish for every person to have a psychedelic experience for that reason.
Totally. Yeah.
Because you truly are never the same again.
For sure. Yeah. To step outside of the, not this is a negative thing, but the smaller self. It all has its place. Like our identity has its place. It's a beautiful thing, but it forgets the totality of everything. It's good to be reminded of like our totality. Although, yeah, this is a fun, maybe we'll go into this at some point, like the difference between like having these psychedelic experiences and then practicality.
Yes, let's go into that. I'd love to hear how you experience that.
For sure. Well, integration has always been something that's really important to me, and I've given it a lot of thought, and I've practiced various ways of integrating. But what I've really come to understand is that we're here in the body to be human, to be in all of this chaos, to do something with it, that's the point. It's just as godly and spiritual as the higher dimensions. It's this luciferic energy actually that would tell us that having a psychedelic experience is more godly than this. That's not true. It's just a different degree of vibrational experience. No better, no worse. So I think it's amazing and very important and very valuable to have a psychedelic experience for exactly everything we just explained. However, if you're in a human body and you're here on Earth, you're here to do something. What are you going to do with that? Continuously going over and over and over and over again to have the psychedelic experience and not doing something with that, I feel like is missing the point. Because that's where we came from, or that's, like it's showing us like that essence, or maybe it's guiding us, like I think guided you into, going to Bali, for example. Like, what are we going to do with that in this human experience? What are we going to do with that? So I think there's a really important duty, I would call it, like a practical piece of like, yeah, how is this experience now informing you? And what are you going to do with that information? Whether it's like guiding you more on your journey, or I've had friends where they've gone to those places and all that taught them was like, you're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be in that body. Go back and do the thing. Like, why are you coming over here? And maybe that's all that's needed. But yeah, I think it's like you can get lost, and that's kind of luciferic energy, like continuously going to the psychedelic thinking it has the answers. It's like, it's just going to show you how to bring yourself about, but you have to take the action in life,
Yeah. I always say, take at least one piece from that experience and immediately integrate it the next day, or at least in the week following the experience, to lock in the gains that you got spiritually or mentally. Let's lock them in the physical 3D. Call the person that you were told to call and apologize to, or forgive yourself for something, or move countries if that's the message, which it was for me. So locking in the gains.
I love that. Yeah, exactly. Locking the gains. It's like codes, right? Like, absolutely. Yeah. So I think it's really important, and that's how we bridge, I believe, it's fun. It's fun to take all of that non-physical experience, the maybe non-observable or very high energetic, and bring it down into this more dense experience and apply that and bring it in. I think it's very fun.
What's been the most wild or deepest or most mysterious trip that you can recall, whether it's on mushrooms or another medicine?
Yeah, let's see here. Well, maybe I'll share a couple, but what kind of first comes to mind is I've actually had some really psychedelic experiences on ketamine. Profoundly so. Some of my most profound death experiences on ketamine, actually, where I came to multiple times with ketamine. I've felt this, like, I'm going to die, and come to a complete peace at that, and all the waves that come with that. Like, what if I actually die, and like, what does that mean for my relationships? And that's been profoundly beautiful, because as I've allowed that to happen in those ketamine experiences, I can only describe it as folding back into myself in infinite fashion. And then it felt like connecting to my soul, where it's like at this deep state of peace, of infinity, which I never would have expected from ketamine. I've also had experiences on ketamine where I could see everything around me with my eyes closed. It's very odd, like bending the perceptible reality in very, very nuanced ways. So that's one of them, where it's just, like very, very deep, peaceful, profound death experiences with ketamine. Oh, no, this is the one that I wanted to share one time on ketamine, and not to offend any women, but I had an experience on ketamine where I became a woman. And I was like, I find on ketamine, I can get like really in my body and aroused, and I was allowing myself to do that. I kept surrendering to it. I was alone in a place that I was living. And with that came like vocalization, and I let myself like vocalize this. And I noticed my voice was kind of turning into more of this like, type of vocalization. And with that, as I was laying on my back, it felt as though, and this became like a vivid, visceral, full-on experience where I was being like penetrated by like an energetic lingam, like an energetic penis. And I felt in my tissues and my body that I had a vagina, and that I was this like woman, and I was like experiencing like this energetic pillar of light. And it was profound, and it was joyous, and it was like transcendental, and all these things. And as I allowed myself to surrender more and more to it, the more I could like receive it. And that was really like a really interesting experience on ketamine. So that's definitely like up there with one of the more profound psychedelic experiences I've had.
Wow, that is trippy.
Very, very trippy.
Did that inform what are the gains that you locked in from that experience?
Yeah, the gains that I got from that experience is I realized a deepened appreciation and also sacredness to approaching women and the feminine, recognizing how, because when I was getting penetrated by this, I was like, whoa, like this is, if I resist, I can't tolerate it. I have to let myself go. And the more I did that, the more there's this trade-off of, if I let myself go, then I'm not protected anymore. And then like how many layers there was to that, to like letting myself be fully in receivership of this. But the more I allowed myself to be in receivership of it, the more I was being ignited by it. So the gains from that is like, I recognize that when I'm entering my partner, that she is surrendering so much of herself and her safety, and that her body is allowing me into one of the most sensitive parts that exist for her. And I don't know how to describe that other than I have this deep somatic appreciation and reverence for that now, where maybe when I was younger, it was like, oh yeah, I just want to like get in there. And now it's like, is she bloomed? Is she ready? Does she? And then also feeling like, wow, like I'm being invited into this space. Like, oh my gosh, I'm being invited into this space. I can enter this space. That I think is the most gains. And it's like how I approach that now. Like I see it as very, very sacred. And
I feel that.
Yeah. It's moving.
Wow. Your first Wachuma experience was also quite powerful.
Definitely. Yeah. That really sparked my work into sexuality, I would say. So when I first sat with Wachuma, I feel very fortunate. It was like me, this really, really, really old shaman. His name is Kamaski, doesn't speak any English, super wise dude. And one of the facilitators at the place I was at, Wilkamayu Spirit, who I continue to work with, the main Maestro John. So very fortunate that it was this very small group. It was basically me and a shaman. And I drank this medicine, quite a large cup of Wachuma, and within about 15, 20 minutes, I actually purged. And I had sat with ayahuasca for 3 times prior to the ceremony, didn't purge at all. But this made me purge. And then I laid down and I was like in this in-between space for about 30 minutes or so, kind of out of body, but somewhat aware that I was in this ceremonial space. And when I started to come back into the awareness of my body there was like this energy in it, and particularly in my root and my sacral. And I started working with that. I started like activating some of the musculature, and it was like, it's like it was alive. Like I could work with it, but it was there. There was something there that was not just me. And this gave me like a full erection. But then as I continued to work with it, it moved throughout my whole body. Like it's like I was, I can describe it none other than like an ejaculation, an orgasm, like moving through and up me. And I was animated for like 15, 20 minutes in this like really energetic, but also very pleasurable state. Which of course I just held, and I was like, wanting to be in that. But then as that started to like settle in me, pretty soon after, this shame or this like other aspect came through, where I was like, oh no, I just had this experience in this sacred space. And this is where the beautiful teaching of Wachuma came in, where I don't know what it's like for you, but when I have conversations with plants, it's like instantly, like I just remember the whole conversation. It's not like back and forth a lot of the time. So it's like I had this dialogue where Wachuma said to me, like, don't feel ashamed. You're not meant to feel ashamed of your sexual energy as a man. It's your gift. Embrace it. Embrace this pleasure. Embrace this beauty. Embrace this love. And in that moment, I recognized that I had been ashamed of my desires, afraid to be potent, even though I know that I have that potency. Afraid that I might, hurt someone or make someone uncomfortable. But that was really holding me back. And I believe that Wachuma gave me that gift. It showed me this is okay. This is a gift. And to celebrate that in me, and ignite me in that way. And yeah, it was deeply profound. And then, from there I went outside and had a bunch of other amazing, profound experiences, talking to plants, talking to the shaman without words, and all these various other things. But that really ignited into me and gave me this level of like, I felt a duty to share the importance, the sacredness, and the purity of pleasure and sexual life force energy. Like that's what it was really teaching me and ignited in me.
Beautiful. Beautifully put.
Thank you.
What is your best understanding of the true nature of reality, having had all your cosmic explorations? How do you walk through the 3D world today? With what philosophies, with what frameworks that are guiding you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there are many ways to interpret, or there are many ways that we can look at the universal language. I call them like interpretations of the logos. And over my years, I just have tried my best to investigate these and bring them into my being. So there's many things now that have become kind of habitual, some of which, like the Hermetic principles. And this requires practice though, but maybe I'll go over some of them and then I'll talk about how they show up in my life. So like Hermetic principles, recognizing, that all is mind, that really it all begins with the thought or with what's coming from the mind, but our mind is informed by an infinite mind, and my mind is filtered by my experiences and so on and so forth. However, that gives birth to like this, we're connected to the higher dimensions, and the same thing is happening here in a different degree. So I always bring that forward, recognizing like what I can learn here is happening up there, and what's happening or up there in a different dimensional reality is happening down here. How do I apply that to my life? Well, it brings me into recognition that there's no less sacredness or power here than anywhere else. It's just a different vibrational experience. And then a vibration, rhythm, these have been such potent teachers that I often use every day. My voice, I like to I like to chant, recognizing the ebbing and flowing, and actually like learning to ride that wave instead of getting succumbed by it. Oh my gosh, I can't even really express through word how just settling that has been to recognize that pendulum is always swinging. And then polarity itself and gender, which I work with quite a bit. Gender meaning that there's always a manifestation of the masculine and feminine that allows for the proliferation of genders, the exchange of genes to manifest, but it's always coming from those two opposite poles, which are really connected to polarity. That's been a profound one that I always hold, and I always try to, like when I'm at wits with myself, or my foundations are shattered, that holds me true, because I think those are the pillars that are holding this universe together. But also inner child work and parts work has also been something that has helped me to navigate myself, and something that I use routinely, like recognizing that there is this deep inner I'll call him little Brian, because that's my birth name, that's what I call him, and recognizing there are different aspects of myself. And that if I can hold them fully in my awareness, and if I can love all of them, then I'm more complete. I'm not segregating myself. And I think this is a beautiful journey for any human, to really reclaim themselves, to really love themselves, and to recognize that, there is a part of us that's vulnerable, that is scared, or that, needs to be treated like a child. And we can be that inner mother, that inner father for that aspect. So that's been very helpful. And most relevant has been human design. I use that very, I don't want to say religiously, but I use it quite, just because it's worked for me. I use it as a frame for communication when I need to make big decisions in my life, or how I go about myself and my work is through human design primarily. And now I'm really starting to integrate it into my coaching, and I think it just works. Like, I think it's just mechanics. Like, it's energetic mechanics. It's like, science calls it the nervous system. Human design would call it the body graph, So I think those two are in a parallel. So
how do you use it in your day-to-day life for decisions and for other aspects of life?
Yeah. So all anyone really needs to know, and this is what I use in my day-to-day life, is my strategy and my authority. So each type has a certain energy signature, let's call it, that's manifesting from the uniqueness of your nervous system, also from the uniqueness of how life force is moving through you. And from that comes a strategy. My strategy is to inform, is to initiate. Really, like, I'm a manifester, and really manifestors don't have a strategy, because regardless of regardless if I inform people, I'm going to make change happen. It's in the nature of my energetics, and I've seen it throughout my whole life. But the informing strategy is helpful, because then I impact in a positive way and not a negative way. Like, I've realized the pain that I've caused by not informing people of what I'm about to do and the actions I'm going to take, because it impacts people's lives. So that is how I have brought it into my life, is often asking myself, like, who do I need to inform before I make this choice, before I start this thing? Who's going to be impacted by this decision? And also, I'm a bit of a visionary. I feel like I'm a pioneer. So the more that I share what's going on, the more that I can have people help me, because I don't think I'm here to build all of these things. I think I'm here to speak on a lot of them, and maybe inspire others to come more into their unique roles, and to have people help me. Like, I'm not here to build it all. So informing helps me to, get more people hopefully helping along with the visions and missions. And then the authority is a way of navigating oneself through the body instead of through the mind. So in human design, the authority, instead of having an external authority, government, your parents, culture, or even maybe more devious, the mind has your inner authority, like the thing that you appeal to for direction. Human design suggests that you use the body, and every person has a different, not every single person, but some people have different authorities. My authority is very in the present moment. I have this intuitive sense, and truth for me is in the present. Whereas some others, truth for them is once they've gone through an emotional wave, they've felt into those emotions, and they've come clear as to what that emotion really means for them. So this is why I really like this system, because there are a lot of successful people in the world who are saying, do this, which will work for some, but doesn't really work for others. And human design has taught me that what I thought was wrong with me was actually really works for me. And I just needed to navigate that. And when I did my experiment, I realized, these things actually do work pretty well for me.
As a final question to wrap up our conversation, what do you think the human experience is all about?
This is so good. This is something that's really been on my mind and in my heart since I was, as much as for as long as I've had thought, I would say. It's always perplexed me. And I really believe that it's all about, wait, ask me the question again.
What is the human experience all about? What does it mean to you?
Yeah. I think it really is, maybe it's a bit of a paradox at first, but I'll say it's really about defining it for oneself. For me, it's been about the more I can enjoy life is when I write the story. I choose to take that power and recognize that, and this is where the paradox comes in, there is a higher power. There is some things I will never understand as Lion Carew. There are some things that I may never know. However, if I let that consume me and just give away all that, then I'm not being an active part in this current incarnation, in this human body, in this story. So I think for me, it's been really defining that. What is that for you? Is it about having a spiritual journey? Is it about diving into psychedelics? Is it about being the best musician, relationships? I'm really curious, and I've always wanted to hear what it is for other people, because I think there's truth in all that, and I think that can actually be really bridging for us. It's like, I used to wonder, like, what is the meaning of life? And now I recognize, or at least how I put what I say about it is that everyone has the meaning of life. Everyone has that. And there's a beautiful truth in that. Instead of trying to find one meaning, it's like, I think we all have the meaning. But we can't really find out what that is for us if we don't connect to ourselves, if we don't have the courage to recognize that our meaning is worthy, being shared, being spoken, being expressed. So yeah, I'd say it's really individual, but it's informed by that one energy. It's really the one energy that's animating all of it. Again, a weird paradox, right? One thing, infinite expressions. So that's how I would put it in so many words.
How do you nurture your relationship with that energy, with God, with the one?
Primarily through stillness. That's been the thing that as a younger man I would avoid a lot. But what has come to in the past more recent years has been the most profound connection is just sitting in stillness. Not very exciting, but I feel like I'm on a journey right now to connect more deeply with my soul, and I've had a lot of psychedelic experiences and beautiful, profound experiences, and now the most intimate connection I can find with God or Source is really just sitting with myself. That's really the practice right now. But then to take it a step further, it's like when I get informed by that and I remember that, I step into that space. It's like bringing that forward, like the psychedelic experience, right? How do I imbue that more in who I am? And with that, I feel this helps me with my relationship with God, because then I feel like I'm not becoming God, but I'm honoring God. I'm celebrating what it has offered me. I get to express what it uniquely offered me, and that I can uniquely bring forward. So that has become a really beautiful relationship that I've been able to develop with God, is recognizing like, oh wow, like I get this time with myself that's only for me. And then how am I really going to express that and bring that forward? And in that, it's like, I feel God, or this energy is celebrating. It's like, yes, yes,
Yes.
awesome. You're doing it in your own unique way.
I love that. Brother, is there anything we haven't touched upon that you'd love to share with the listener? Anything, any last words of wisdom that you'd like to leave the listener with?
Well, before that, I just want to thank you. I thank you for giving me so much space to speak. You asked some really amazing questions, and we got to dive into some really fascinating avenues and actually learn some things about myself. It's part of my process very much. I learn a lot when I speak about my own process. So thank you for that. Thank you for what you're doing. It's nice to be in presence with you as well. I feel like you hold a really good masculine presence. And it's nice to like be in physical presence with you, and just, yeah, it's like there's something I recognize in you that it's kind of hard to put words to, but when someone's like on their journey and they're revealing themselves to themselves, like there's a certain unspoken understanding and felt thing that is exchanged, and I just want to like put words to that I feel with you, brother, and I'm appreciative of who you are and being in this space and time with you.
Likewise, brother. Likewise. I felt a resonance to you before we met. So it's been beautiful to see this conversation unfold and have that resonance confirmed.
Amazing, man. As for last words, I think I know. With all that's been said, I really like to remind people of the importance of their relationship to breathing. All these elements that I've talked about, sex, masculinity, empowerment, vulnerability, even the understanding of what the universe is itself, it's animated through our breath. And I don't think it gets, now it's getting a much more awareness and people are speaking about it more. There's a remembering, but it's our connection to spirit. And like, for those who are listening, really let that settle in for a moment. It's your connection to all the information, to all that is through your breathing. It's through that expression, that mechanism. And through that, vibration occurs, rhythm occurs. It's animating you. The quality of our breath is so very important. The yogis knew this, right? So, yeah, if there's anything outside of stillness that you're wanting to cultivate in life, let it be breath, because that will change the filter of one's experience. It'll change the filter of your experience. It's changed the filter of mine. Can't have good sex without good breath. Can't move without good breath. Relationships, everything will change. So, that's really what I want to end with. It's just like how profoundly breath has changed my life. How much I would love to see more people have an intimate relationship with breath and see it as a prayer, see it as sacred, that like, oh, I get to breathe in life. I get to move that through me. It's profound when you adopt that type of relationship to your breathing instead of, it's just breath. It's just happening. Like, of course.
What's a great way for someone to start that journey into cultivating better breath?
The easiest way is just to become more aware of your breathing throughout the day. Every so often, take a deep belly breath, breathe into your nose. Start to create a habit around being mindful of your breathing. If that's difficult, you can use transitionary moments in your life. So getting out of bed, okay, before I transition, I take a deep breath. Before I leave the room, I take a deep breath. Before I go on my phone. This is a whole other conversation. Maybe some other time we can go into it, like how to create habits. It's something I'm fascinated with. There's like a trigger, then there's the behavior itself, then there's a reward. But I think it's just the attention to breath. There's a lot of, people can find so many breathwork practices out there and they're fabulous and amazing. Highly recommend. But I think it's just like give a bit more attention to the quality of your breath. Take some deeper breaths throughout your day. Recognize, even myself, I'm like, whew, sharing so much right now, even me. Taking a deep breath, feeling what that feels like, relaxing into it, and getting curious about what it feels like to breathe.
I bet every listener just now took a deeper breath.
Right? Do it. We should have started the podcast like this. All right, we're going to take some breathing breaks. That would actually be a cool podcast. Like every 30 minutes, we just do like 5 deep breaths. Next time for sure.
Absolutely. Brother, it's been such a pleasure. I deeply appreciate your presence, your vulnerability, your truth, your ability to stay in your centeredness and your groundedness, and your nuance and your way of looking at life. It's such an honor to interview you and to bring your wisdom to my audience.
It's my pleasure, brother. Thank you so much. Yeah, this has been amazing. To all those listening, lots of love. Keep living your life. You're a beautiful human. Thank you, brother.
Thank you. You've been listening to the James Xander Trip with Lion Carew. You'll have all the links in the show notes if you want to follow Lion. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a listener. You can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, and we'll see you in the next episode.